Once upon a time, in the ancient city of Ur, there lived a man named Abram. He was 75 years old, married to Sarai, and they had no children. Life in Ur was comfortable, bustling markets, familiar neighbors, and a thriving household. Yet, despite the comforts of home, Abram's heart felt strangely unsettled, as though he were made for something greater. One quiet evening, as Abram gazed at the countless stars in the heavens, he heard a voice, unmistakably divine. It was Yahweh, the Lord of all creation. And this is what the Lord said. "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." Can you imagine what Abram must have felt? Leave everything? At 75? Yet, Abram didn't argue or hesitate. He chose to trust the voice of God, pack up his life, and step into the unknown. So Abram, Sarai, and his nephew Lot gathered their belongings, herded their flocks, and began the long journey. Abram's first stop was in Haran, where he stayed for a while, but the call to keep moving never left his heart. Finally, they arrived in the land of Canaan. As Abram stood surveying the land, God spoke again. "To your offspring, I will give this land." Offspring? Abram must have been puzzled. After all, Sarai was barren, and they had no children. But Abram built an altar to the Lord there as a sign of his faith. As they journeyed further, they faced challenges. A severe famine struck the land, forcing Abram and his household to go to Egypt. There, Abram made mistakes, including a moment of fear when he told Pharaoh that Sarai was his sister, not his wife, to protect himself. But even in Abram's imperfections, God remained faithful. Pharaoh discovered the truth, and instead of harming Abram, he sent them away with more wealth than they had before. After leaving Egypt, Abram and Lot realized their flocks and herds were too large to stay together. They decided to part ways. Lot chose the lush plains of the Jordan, near Sodom and Gomorrah, while Abram stayed in Canaan. Alone, Abram might have felt uncertain, but God appeared to him again. "Look around from where you are, to the north, south, east, and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted." Abram's faith deepened. He moved to Hebron, built another altar, and continued trusting the promises of God. Years passed, and still, Abram and Sarai remained childless. One evening, as Abram sat under the stars, the Lord spoke again. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." But Abram, bold yet humble, asked, "Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus?" God's reply was extraordinary. "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. So shall your offspring be." Abram believed God, and God credited it to him as righteousness. But God didn't stop there. He made a covenant, a sacred promise. In an ancient ritual, Abram prepared animals for sacrifice, and as the sun set, a deep darkness fell. In the darkness, Abram saw a smoking fire pot and a blazing torch pass between the pieces of the sacrifice. It was a symbol of God binding himself to his promises. Though the promise was sure, the waiting was long. Sarai, growing impatient, suggested Abram have a child with her servant, Hagar. Abram agreed, and Hagar bore a son, Ishmael. But this wasn't God's plan. Though he promised to bless Ishmael, God made it clear that Abram's heir would come through Sarai. When Abram was 99 years old, God appeared again, changing Abram's name to Abraham, meaning father of many nations, and Sarai's name to Sarah, meaning princess. God told Abraham that within a year, Sarah would have a son. Overwhelmed, Abraham laughed, not out of disbelief, but wonder. Sarah laughed too when she overheard the news. And just as God promised, Sarah bore a son, Isaac, whose name means laughter. Through Isaac, God's covenant would continue, fulfilling the promise of blessing for all nations. Abram's story isn't just about one man's journey. It's about faith, obedience, and the unfailing promises of God. From Abram, later called Abraham, came a family, then a nation, and ultimately, Jesus Christ, the fulfillment of God's promise to bless all nations. And so, Abram's story reminds us that God's promises may take time, but they are always sure. Like Abram, we are called to trust and step into the unknown, knowing that the God who calls us is faithful to fulfill His word. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more wonderful stories. Until next time, stay happy and keep believing. Before we go, let's think about the story. Why do you think God reminded Abram of his promises later? Share your thoughts in the comments below.